I guess I'll just start with explaining how I got into track and field, and then going from there, we can talk about how you can identify different athletes and the approach and different things like that. So I actually was originally a competitive gymnast. I did that from about third grade to eighth grade. And I quit in eighth grade, but still knew I was pretty athletic and always loved sports. So I asked my friend how if I could join the track team, how can I join it? Because I used to be in recess with boys and I was always the fastest. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a sprinter. I want to be the next Allison Felix. And I feel like that's what a lot of people join. A lot of us join track to sprint, not to be a triple jumper or a long jumper. And so I joined, and my coach was the type of person that was going to put athletes in every single event. And so I joined to originally sprint, thought I was going to be doing the 55. I'm also from New Jersey. So we did the 55, 300, 400, 200. And then she put me in high jump, shot put, long jump, hurdles. She really had me try out whatever. And I think that speaks to how you identify long and triple jumpers. It's really just based off of kind of whoever sticks with it. You throw your athletes in whichever events you can, and you see who really excels in each one. And so I started long jumping my freshman year, then moved to triple jump in my sophomore year. And as Justin said, he broke the school record the first time. I think I broke my school record the first time I triple jumped, and it really just stuck from there. I ended up getting a scholarship to UGA. Almost broke the national record in high school. That was really sad though, because I was about 1 centimeter away. But went to UGA and really learned a lot of technique there. And that's how I really became so successful, and I'm still competing to this day. So I just want to emphasize that to all the coaches out there today. You just have to try to put the athletes in different events, especially if they're coordinated. If you see athletes who are picking up on drills extremely quickly, or it just seems like things are natural to them, like A skip, B skip, high knees, butt kicks, they're picking it up really quickly, go ahead and try them in the long jump and triple jump. It doesn't hurt to throw them in there and see how it goes. Another thing is powerful athletes. I think sometimes coaches try to focus more on who are the fastest athletes. I'll put them in the jumps. But some athletes are more powerful, and even if they're not that fast, they produce that power to still get an effective jump out. And then, of course, what everyone knows, fast athletes, if they can transfer that speed on the track also onto the runway and through the jump, they'll jump pretty far. And so I think if you can focus on these athletes, and if you don't count anyone out, just let the athletes try different events. You'll be surprised who will be good at what it is. So coming from my personal experience of trying out the high jump, shot put, long jump, and hurdles, just don't count anyone out and try your high school athletes in any and everything and see what really sticks. So we're going to start out with just the approach, which I didn't have knowledge about this at all in high school. I just was one of those people that I'm going to run as fast as I can and see how far I can jump. And so approach should be typically 12 to 16 steps. And I always recommend that you have your athlete count their steps. And it's usually just counting their takeoff legs. So for example, if I take off with my right leg and I take 16 steps, I would be counting 8 right foots. And my 8th right foot should be at the board. You don't ever want to leave your athletes just running and taking off with whatever foot's at the board, because they'll get there and be like, that was the wrong foot, or they'll be like, my foot was way behind the board. So it's easier if they're counting, you know exactly where their foot should be every time, and they can tell you, oh, my 8th foot was way over, or my 8th foot was way behind. And then deciding on how long the approach should be is really just based off of how the athlete's handling their speed. So if you have an athlete that is doing 16 steps and it looks like they're all over their place, they're not really controlling their speed, it looks messy, then you might want to shorten it to something like more like 12 steps and make sure they're having a controllable speed. Moving on to the phases of the approach, there are 3 phases: the drive phase, the transition, and then maximum velocity. And again, I said in high school, I probably was right around transition and maximum velocity the entire time. But the drive phase is really where you're pushing out, head is down, and really just trying to create speed back there, slowly building up. The transition phase is where you're transitioning from the drive to then full knees up, chest up. And this is the part that a lot of athletes will skip. Sometimes you'll find athletes that they drive, they get some good pushes out of the back of their approach, and then they just stand up and are sprinting right away. And you don't want it to be this automatic transition. You want it to be slowly, you see their chest come up, their head come up slowly. And then maximum velocity, which I think a lot of athletes reach this too early. It should really just be the last 4 steps. So you don't want the athlete running full speed halfway through their approach, because they're probably not going to be able to maintain that full speed all the way through the board. And so just emphasize to all your athletes that the last 4 steps should really be their fastest ones, and not to pop up when they're transitioning. As I was mentioning before with the approach and the 16 steps, it should be a controlled speed. I know athletes want to just run as fast as you can, because the faster you run, the faster you jump. But to be honest, if you can't control your speed, you're not going to be able to control the jump. And if you can't control the jump, you're going to end up getting injured. And so, even though you want your athletes to run extremely fast on the runway, it's important that it's at a controllable speed. I always recommend that they practice the approach rhythm with cones first. And so this would be not on the runway, not on the board, just have it on the track or even on grass or turf, where you just set up 3 cones that represent the 3 phases: the drive, the transition, and maximum velocity. And just have your athletes consistently go through just a rhythm run where they're just trying to focus on, okay, drive phase, transition, maximum velocity. And they're not really focused on, oh, I'm not on the board, or I'm trying to run as fast as I can into the sandpit. It's just, I'm going to try to hit these 3 different phases. And then from there, once they kind of find the rhythm, you can move them onto a runway and still not have them focus on the board. Just have them focusing on those 3 phases on the runway. And then eventually you can add in the board and have them just trying to be consistent with hitting the board on the runway. Another thing that athletes will often forget is just maintaining proper running mechanics. Sometimes you'll see athletes who have perfect form on the track, and then they get to the runway and it doesn't even look like they're trying to run properly anymore. They're just focused on jumping so much. So just make sure that athletes are not getting distracted and forgetting their form, and that they still have the proper running mechanics: knees up, chest up, arms not crossing the body, just swinging back and forth when they're running. And the last thing for the approach is finding a mark, which I think this is pretty consistent that high school coaches use. But what I did is I would start at the board, and I would be facing away from the sandpit and just count my steps backwards. I'll just run, and my coach would find. So say I am taking 16 steps. I would start at the board facing away from the sandpit and take 16 steps, and that 16th step my coach would mark for me, or another athlete would mark for me, and that would be my mark that I would use. And just going through practices, I recommend not trying to adjust the mark too much, because sometimes you'll find coaches that will try to get their athlete on the board every single practice, and what it leads to is one practice I'm 2 feet forward, the next practice I'm 6 feet backward, and they just keep moving it all over the place. Versus if they're in the relative region of the board, that it's just practice. So you're just trying to get them into a good, consistent run. And then at the meet, you can be a lot more specific about, okay, back up 6 inches today. We need you to get on the board, versus at practice where you're really just trying to feel out the rhythm and just want to see much more consistency. So I wouldn't say stress about moving the mark back and forth at practice. Just have a relative mark and get them to be consistent with that rhythm run. Now, moving on to the takeoff. The takeoff is different for long jump and triple jump, but the one thing that is the same for both of them is you need to run through the board. A lot of athletes are going to want to slow down to take off. They want to prepare. They may reach if they feel like they're going to be behind. They may put that foot out and try to reach for the board. They may stutter step if they feel like they're too close. So all of those things we don't want to see. We want it to look like they're in the middle of a 100-meter race. They're literally just running through the board, or they're running through the finish line the same way. Like it should look, you shouldn't be able to tell that there's a board there and that they're about to take off. Another thing is making sure the athlete is keeping their feet underneath their hips. And so this is what I was saying about, like, don't reach. Some athletes, they feel like they're far from the board, so they're going to stick their foot out and try to be on the board. It should be completely like running normal. Their feet are right underneath their hips. The long jump takeoff consists of jumping up and out. It's a combination. So triple jump will be more outwards and high jump is more upwards, but long jump is a combination of both. So just try to find a balance for your athletes, that they're not trying to jump too high, but then they're also not just jumping horizontally. And this is really emphasized with the knee drive. Have them hold their knee drive at 90 degrees and try to have them hold it as long as possible. I always think that a great cue for athletes is hold the knee until your body is over the sand pit. So sometimes you'll see athletes, they'll drive their knee really high and then they'll come right back down and they're ready to land. So a cue you can give them is, okay, don't drop that knee drive until your body's over the sand pit, or putting a cone into the sand pit and saying, don't drop that knee drive until your body is over this cone in the sand pit. And that just emphasizes holding that knee drive as long as possible and not rushing to land. Moving on to the takeoff leg, I think this is always based off of the athlete's preference, whatever is natural and comfortable for them. There's no specific way to decide what your takeoff leg should be. I did mine based off of what I felt comfortable with. If the athlete can't decide though, it's great to have them go through just a takeoff drill on both legs and see which one feels natural. If they're still undecided, you honestly can choose which one looks better and just stick with that and see how it feels. Now going to the triple jump takeoff. So a triple jump takeoff, again, run through the board. And I think in triple jump, athletes are more likely to slow down because they know that they're about to take off and come back down on that same foot again versus in long jump where you're just jumping to a sand pit. So really watch out for athletes trying to slow down and just emphasize to them that you have to run through the board. Don't reach, don't stutter step, just run as if the board is not there. And a great cue for this is imagining that their foot is glued to the board. So the takeoff consists of jumping out. And if you see, I think you guys can see my mouse, but this girl, the silhouette here, if you were imagining this is a board here and her foot is still glued to the board, you can see her takeoff angle is much more horizontal versus the long jump, which the angle is the knee's still at 90, but it's much more upwards and out versus just being out. And so I think a good cue always is making sure they're imagining their foot is glued to the board before taking off, and making sure the hop isn't too high. So if you get triple jumpers that are starting to do a takeoff more like this long jumper silhouette, their hop is going to end up much too high and they're going to end up crashing in their second and third phase. And it's not going to feel comfortable because there's a lot of force when you go so high and then coming right back down on that leg. So that's one thing to just avoid. And again, the knee drives focus on an outwards motion and telling them that their foot is glued to the board when taking off. And again, with takeoff leg, it's really their preference and whatever's natural. It's actually most common for long jump and triple jump takeoff legs to be different, but I personally take off of the same leg. I have a right leg long jump takeoff and a right leg triple jump takeoff. So that's kind of uncommon, but it's definitely some people have the same exact thing. And some athletes will prefer that their second phase to third phase is their dominant leg. So right now I take off of my right leg. So my non-dominant leg will be my step leg, and that's what's going to go into the sand pit in the triple jump. But some athletes prefer to take off of their non-dominant and have their dominant leg ready for their second and third phase. So again, based off the athlete's comfortability and whatever is natural to them. So getting into drills, there are so many different ones. This is just a basic one that I'm doing, but I don't want you to feel like you're limited to like you'll need devices or some kind of special things to do drills. I grew up in New Jersey where there would be snow all over the track and we'd have to run on concrete in the parking lot, or we would be in the basement working out. So my coaches didn't have a lot to work with, but they found ways to use what they could. And so I think having a box is a perfect thing, or even just using a high jump mat is another thing that's it's accessible and most people have those things. And so this is just one example of a drill, which is focusing on flat foot contact. In the triple jump and long jump, you don't ever want your athletes on their toes or on their heels. Everything's really based off a flat foot. And so this one's just working on reacting off the ground quickly and making sure my foot's flat. And you're gonna see my arms are working too. My back leg is just on a box and you see my arms are working, knees coming to 90, foot on the ground is flat, and really just working on reaction off the ground. And so this is an easy one. I think this can be done anywhere. Even if you don't have a box, you can find a stairwell and put your foot on your back foot on a stair and do that. Another basic one is standing on a box and having your athlete come down on one foot and just focus on landing with the flat foot. And it seems really basic, but these are things I do to this day that really just emphasize that if you can do this off a box with no speed standing, then when you're jumping, your body will do the exact same thing. And with drills, it's really focusing on 8 to 10 reps of drills. You don't want them doing too little where it's not going to be effective, and you don't want them doing too many where it's going to really mess with their body or shins, or things may start hurting. And so for more drills, my coach, my current coach, his Instagram is Jeremy FHJ, and he posts on there every day. You'll probably get a drill every day from him. He's very consistent about posting. So that's a great place to find some easy drills. My personal Instagram is Ketur1, KTORR1, and I post triple jump videos on there too. And there's also a jumps training guide Dropbox available at this link. And then my coach's website is maximumvelocityathletics.com. And again, that's all free. And there's so many drills available on there to anyone. So I would recommend going to those and finding just basic drills to do with your athletes. Now, some key reminders. These are going to seem very basic, but I think it really helped me and will help your athletes. And I just want to emphasize that your reminders and your cues that you give to athletes, they have to be something that the athlete understands. So sometimes as coaches, we'll get really into technique and start using scientific terms and research and all this stuff. But if an athlete doesn't understand you, they can't execute what you're saying. And so keeping it as basic as possible is really great for the athlete to be able to execute what you want. And then even allowing athletes to ask questions about, what does this help? Why are we doing this? Just welcoming questions from athletes, I think, helps them to even know, okay, I'm going to work on this today because it's going to help me do this in the future. And I understand that this is helping me do this, versus them just mindlessly at practice, not really knowing why they're doing things, not really understanding what they're doing. So just want to encourage you guys to really be clear and concise, and making sure your athletes understand what you're saying. So some great cues are eyes up. Athlete shouldn't be looking at the board, shouldn't be trying to adjust for the board, shouldn't be looking into the sand pit. I should be looking up. So make sure that looking down. Chest up. This is, you'll see it in my next video that I'm going to show of me, but chest up, sometimes athletes start running forward, kind of anticipating getting to the board, but you want to make sure your chest is up. You want to make sure even when they're jumping that their chest isn't thrown forward as they're trying to land. And this is why I recommend not teaching the landing right away, because athletes will begin to force their chest downwards as soon as they jump. And you can see it in this silhouette here. This guy is driving his knee. That's great knee drive. But then he already starts forcing the chest down to try to land, even though the ground is all the way here. And so you really shouldn't be trying to land until you're close to the ground. And so there's no reason to rush to try to get to your athletes to land on their butts yet. If they just still want to land on 2 feet, that's perfectly fine. And just emphasizing that they keep their chest up when they're jumping. Another one that goes with chest up is patience in the air. I know I was one person that always would just look down and be ready to come back down to the ground as soon as possible. But just emphasize to them that they should embrace that air time and try to stay as much time in the air as possible. Don't rush to come back down to the ground. As I discussed before, flat foot contact throughout the triple jump phases. You don't want athletes coming on their toes or heels. Heels could lead to heel bruises. Toes could lead to ankle injuries, instability. It just is not good and could lead to injury. So make sure you're focused on flat foot contacts throughout each of the hop, step, and jump in the triple jump. Don't let the arms cross the body throughout the triple jump phases. Again, you'll see this in my video that I show. I was running and my arms were crossing my body. And then I also, when I triple jumped, my arm came all the way across my body. So I know Justin talked about how in hurdling, you kind of cross your arm over when you're going over the hurdle, but you don't want that happening in the triple jump because it'll throw your balance off and just really mess up your phases. So make sure arms are just swinging back and forth. And then when you're training the athletes, always start jump drills from standing or a short approach. You don't ever want to introduce a drill and it's from 6 steps, because the athlete's going to focus on trying to run as fast as they can in those 6 steps and then really mess up the drill. And sometimes when drills have a lot of speed behind them, it can kind of compensate for the actual technique you want to work on. So starting from standing or a shorter approach lets the athlete really get comfortable with learning the drill and doing everything correctly in the drill, and later on adding in more speed so that they can progress to a longer approach. And then lastly, make sure the athlete is actively using arms throughout the drills and jumping. Sometimes you'll see athletes who really just keep their arms by their side and are not swinging them, moving them, not creating force with them. They're just hanging there. And your arms are a useful tool. They can help you to jump further. So don't just let them chill there. Make sure they're working them actively and using them to create force. All right, and so now specifically for triple jump, there are many different arm techniques that you've probably seen, but I always recommend just starting out with basic running mechanics during the triple jump. So if the athlete really doesn't have an established approach yet and doesn't have great form, there's no need to be trying to add in a specific arm technique yet. Really just keep it to basic running mechanics. But I would say you can start to progress to different arm techniques when the athlete is more advanced in the triple jump. So this is probably with your juniors or seniors, or people that you're seeing are really executing things well, but you still feel like there's room for improvement. And so these can be introduced when you're doing short approach jumps, and there's 3 different types. They're hard to explain verbally, so I have videos, but for now, I'll just try to explain it verbally. Double arm is when both arms are coming forward together and both arms are swinging backwards together. Double single arm combination is either when an athlete hops with a double, both arms coming forward, both arms coming backwards, and then switches to a single arm for their step phase, or vice versa, they may hop and have a single arm, but then for the step phase, they switch to a double arm. And then the third option is over the top single arm, and that's what I currently do. And it's in the hop phase, you'll see the arm will come over my head and then transition back into the basic running mechanics single arm. And what is most common is men usually double arm. You'll see most collegiate and professional men are using double arm, and most collegiate and professional women are using over the top single arm. So I would just encourage you, I'm not gonna play the videos. I'll probably play the videos twice so that we can see it in full speed and one time in slow. But as we're watching the videos, just look for the things that I mentioned before: knees up, chest up, arms swinging back and forth, not across the body, foot glued to the board at the takeoff, flat foot contacts, not on my toes or heels, not reaching for the board or stutter stepping, and then running through the board too, not slowing down to take off. So this first example is the basic running mechanics that I recommend that any athlete does. This is where you would start with an athlete. And this is, you're going to see me in high school triple jumping, and I'll show you the things that I do wrong, and you'll see them that I do wrong, and then you'll see the progression into what I should have been doing right. So let's start. Hopefully this is clear. Let's go back. All right, so starting out with, first of all, you see my chest is forward. Like I was telling you guys, I'm running with my chest forward, really anticipating the board being there. Hop, step, and you see my arm went across my body there. Right there, my arm is all the way across my body like I'm hurdling. That throws me off of balance, so not good. You don't want to see that in your athletes. Jump. And as you can see, I did not have a landing. My coaches did not teach me a landing until later on. So this is my junior year of high school triple jumping. You see my normal arm running mechanics, nothing special. So I would say this is where you start. This is the kind of arm movements that you start out with. Of course, you don't want them crossing the body, but that's where you would start with arm technique. Now, over the top single arm, this is going to be a video of me again. This is my sophomore year of college, and this is the most common arm movement you'll see for women. See knees up, chest up a lot better. And in the hop phase, I don't know if you saw that, my arm went over my head. Let me go back. Right there, over my head. I don't know if you guys are seeing that. Let me go back again. Right there, you see the arm is going over my head. That's over the top single arm. All right, and then moving on to single double arm combination. So in this one, you'll see Will Clay will start out with a single arm and then move to double arm for his second phase. Here we see drive, 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 head is down, starts to transition now, attacks, single, double, and then lands. So let's slow it down. But you see the knees up, chest up. Right now, that's single arm. His arms were apart in the hop. That's single arm right there. Now you see double arm, both arms in front, both arms behind, and finishes. So that's another combination. That one's much more rare. I don't see that one as often. It's usually over the top single arm or double arm. And then we'll go to Christian Taylor for double arm. And this is both arms coming forward, both arms coming backward at the same time. Most men do this. Dry phase, head is down, starts to transition, attack. Both arms in front, both arms in front, lands. So we'll slow it down. You see here, knees up, chest up, great running form. Both arms are in front there, both arms are behind. Both arms are in front, both arms are behind. That's double arm. Most men will do that. So those are options. I know it might be a little bit confusing if this is the first time you're seeing it, but those are the options really for arm techniques when you have athletes who have really shown great form in every other area and you're just looking for other places that could get them a few more inches and just create more power in between their phases. So the last thing I'll talk about is practicing the long jump and triple jump. And so personally, I did not lift weights in high school. Every once in a while, our coaches would be like, oh, go in the weight room and we do like squat and bench press or so. But I didn't really lift weights. And I honestly think that was good for me because when I got to college and my coach taught me the correct way to lift weights and I hadn't been introduced to it, it left me so much more room to get better and build that strength. And so I didn't lift weights. I'm not saying that you shouldn't lift weights with your athletes. I'm just saying my personal experience. I really only jumped one time a week or even less because again, I was in New Jersey and we had access to a basement if there's snow on the track or access to a concrete parking lot. And so it really wasn't easy to get jump practices in all the time. I mostly was sprinting, which built a great base for me, especially endurance wise, running the 400. I felt like I had a lot of endurance in me for my fifth and sixth jumps when other athletes might have been getting tired. And so that's my personal high school experience. But for recommendations, you guys are all in Georgia, so much better weather. I'd recommend in a competition week, do one approach day and one jump day. So the one approach day is kind of you just working on making sure the athletes right on the board, executing those three phases correctly, drive, transition, maximum velocity, and then moving into one jump day that week where they're just working on short approach technique and feeling good for the competition that week. Now, in a normal week, you would instead do one approach day and two jump days, and that would give the athlete opportunity 2 times to work on their jumping technique versus in the competition week, they'll have one technical day for jumping, and then they'll jump also at the competition. And so I always recommend spreading the jump days out. I know in high school, I didn't really struggle much with shin splints or anything like that. But nowadays, I definitely have to have my days spread out. Monday and Friday, I would recommend, or Tuesday and Thursday. So you don't want to really put all the jump days together. So like if you have Monday and Tuesday, they're doing jump days, or Thursday and Friday doing jump days, that's back to back. And I feel like that could lead to more just pounding on the body and maybe shin splints or things like that. So I always recommend just spreading the days out. And again, as I mentioned earlier, 8 to 10 reps of every drill that you have them do, just so it's not too much of a small amount that they're not really getting the hang of it, but also not too many where it may be pounding on the body a little bit too much. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that for any athletes who are selecting a college or considering being a college student athlete, I actually have a blog on my website, and it talks about my experiences at the University of Georgia, being a student athlete, recruiting process, what you're not told, how to choose a school. Just there's so much about becoming a student athlete that no one really talks about or gives advice about. So I talked about my personal experiences there, and I'd recommend if you have any athletes looking for advice on that, they check out my blog. But that's really it. Thank you guys for listening. And if you have any questions, I think we're going to move into that.